Hello and welcome to my channel. Here I review new movies and today I want to talk about Code 8 Part 2. It came out recently on Netflix and I have to admit I'm a sucker for stories that are similar to X-Men. Code 8, for those who didn't watch the first film, takes place in a universe where 4% of the human population is born with superpowers. Their gifts come in a wide variety of flavors, ranging from controlling the elements to telepathy. Unfortunately for those powered people, normal society has banned the use of their powers in public. They're also heavily discriminated against by non-powered people and have to put up with politicians constantly targeting them. Code 8 Part 2 picks up after the events of the first film with its protagonist Connor Reed getting out of jail. He picks up the shattered pieces of his life and finds a job cleaning at a community center. Then one day he discovers a young girl named Pavani hiding in the shed and he takes her inside. Pavani's brother was recently slain by a corrupt police officer and now the cops are after her. Hoping to get justice for the girl, Connor teams up with a criminal named Garrett from his past to take on a local police sergeant named King Kingston. The film comes from a team of writers. There's Chris Pear and Jeff Chan who worked on the first film, and then Sharon Lee, Jesse Lavercombe, and Tom Selenow. Jeff Chan, who directed the first film, also directed this one, which stars Stephen Amell as Garrett, Robbie Amell as Connor, Serena Gulumgaus as Pavani, and Alex Malari Jr. as Sergeant Kingston. The story begins in a fictional place called Lincoln City. It looks like a modern-day city just with a few science fiction additions like robots and police drones. We follow Connor as he and Pavani escape across the slums of the city, avoiding the police and trying to uncover evidence to use against them. There are a few fight scenes, a few horror moments where the Terminator-like robots hunt down powered people, and a few emotional confrontations between Connor and Garrett. The journey is accompanied by a bit of orchestral music that appears during dramatic moments. Short, powerful pieces that follow the scenery and add as much emotion as they can. There are also dour tones and electric beats propagating in the background and creating a dystopic cyberpunk feeling. For the cast, you have a couple of powered-up gangsters that follow Garrett around, a few corrupt police officers under the employ of Sergeant Kingston, and finally Connor, Pavina, and Mina, the community center director. Most of the screen time is spent with Connor, Pavina, and Garrett, with the occasional cutaway to Sergeant Kingston and his henchmen. The film also starts with a short introduction from the perspective of Pavina's brother Tarek. We see his last moments and how the story kicks off. Okay, so how did the film do? The story is exciting and full of powerful emotions, but it also plays fast and loose with its own established rules. The main plotline is a basic tale about a corrupt police officer and one downtrodden hero standing up against him. The story does a good job of establishing the stakes early on and creating a terrifying presence with the Guardian robots. The journey it takes us on is fairly eventful and full of twists and turns. It's a bit cliche, but they did a good job of keeping everything interesting. Its characters are fairly nuanced and personable too. The problem comes with their powers. The film never explains the limits of anyone's powers or how they work, so you end up constantly confused. The characters are always as strong or as weak as they need to be for the story, and it cheapens it quite a bit. The cast does what they can with the material, and there are some decent moments here and there, but most of what they're doing is basic conversation work. There's also a little bit of emotion tossed in to keep things interesting. Most of them are playing somewhat stereotypical characters that follow along some fairly normal storylines. Robbie Amell plays the downtrodden reluctant hero. Stephen Amell plays the criminal with a soft spot for the hero, and Alex Malari Jr. plays the typical corrupt cop. We do see some decent emotional moments between Robbie Amell and Jean Yoon, Sammy Azaro and Serena Gulumgaus, and a good confrontation between Stephen Amell and Alex Malari Jr. Visually, the film is quite basic and takes place in a normal city. We see them running around, moving between dark and dingy locations while the police operate from an office building with all kinds of screens monitoring different areas of the city. The action comes in short bursts and involves a lot of visual effects for the power usage. Some of the CGI for the powers was quite well done, and when it came together well, it made for cinematic moments. It didn't always look good though. There were some moments where they overused slow motion and the textures didn't look great. It became almost laughable. The camera work is a bit shaky all around, and the lighting isn't great, but the journey as a whole is easy to follow and understand. Unfortunately, the film's big moments were a little bit too low budget and not impressive enough to be considered standout. Sound-wise, the film makes effective use of the tracks it has, but the tracks are not overly memorable. They do add quite a bit of emotion in small bursts, but the tracks tend to be quite simplistic with only one or two instruments, and they tend to be generic sounding. There was almost no original music throughout the film. They didn't use their songs for anything other than the emotional journey, and what was there wasn't memorable. It works for the film, but it isn't impressive. Overall, Code 8 Part 2 is an okay film. It tells a decent tale set in a science fiction universe, and if you like that sort of thing, you'll probably enjoy the film. If you're not into superpowers and dystopic settings, you probably won't enjoy it. As for a rating, I'd give this film a 5 out of 10. Remember, these are just my thoughts on the film. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Bye-bye!